When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the West unleashed sweeping sanctions, aiming to cripple Moscow's economy and isolate it from global finance. Yet, 3 years later, Russia's economy has not collapsed. Trade with Russia, though changed, remains surprisingly robust. The sanctions were not an impenetrable wall, but a fence riddled with strategic gaps. The paradox? The world condemns Russia, but still does business with it. In 2024, the EU imported over 50 billion euros in Russian goods, down from pre-war levels but far from zero. The US, too, imported nearly $4 billion in Russian materials like uranium and fertilizers. India's imports, mostly crude oil, soared to over $60 billion. These aren't signs of total isolation, but of a global system adapting to new realities. Western nations carved out exemptions for goods too critical to sacrifice: nuclear fuel, metals, fertilizers. The result? A sanctions regime powerful in symbolism, but selective in practice, shaped by national interests. Economic interdependence, built over decades, can't be severed overnight, even in war. The West's sanctions are extensive but highly targeted. Russia is cut off from high-tech components and much of the global financial system, but energy and critical materials remain major exceptions. The EU banned seaborne Russian oil, but pipeline gas and LNG still flow to some member states. The G7's oil price cap lets India and China buy Russian crude, as long as it's cheap. The US still imports Russian uranium. The EU still buys metals like palladium and nickel. Russian fertilizers remain largely unsanctioned to avoid a global food crisis. The result: sectors fueling Russia's military are targeted, but those vital to Western economies are spared. National interests shape sanctions more than rhetoric. Germany still imports Russian metals for its auto industry. Italy continues buying Russian LNG. The US exempts Russian uranium and fertilizers to protect its energy and agriculture. India, meanwhile, has turned sanctions into opportunity, buying discounted Russian oil and paying in rupees or dirhams. New Delhi frames this as national interest, not sanctions evasion. These choices reveal a multipolar world, where emerging powers like India chart their own course. Even within the West, energy needs and economic realities drive different approaches. Sanctions are tailored, not uniform. The result? A patchwork of policies, each reflecting domestic priorities over global unity. Sanctions against Russia are a study in political realism. The West banned luxury goods and advanced tech. Low cost to themselves, high cost to Moscow. But when it came to energy and critical minerals, self-interest prevailed. A total energy ban risked global recession. The oil price cap was a compromise to keep markets stable while squeezing Russian profits. The same logic spared Russian palladium, titanium, and fertilizers, too vital to Western industries to cut off. Sanctions became a precision tool, not a blunt weapon, designed to hurt Russia, but not at the West's own expense. Their true purpose advanced national interests, not pure moral justice. The architecture of sanctions is as much about protecting the West as punishing Moscow. Despite sanctions, global trade with Russia adapts and persists. Third countries like Kazakhstan, Turkey, and the UAE act as intermediaries, re-exporting goods to Russia. Dual-use items and banned tech often reach Russia through these gray channels. Enforcement is tough. Loopholes and shell companies abound. Russia also circumvents oil price caps with a shadow fleet of tankers and non-Western insurers. Trade in yuan, rupees, and dirhams sidesteps US financial controls. Sanctions have raised costs and complexity for Russia, but haven't stopped trade. Commerce, like water, finds new routes. The global economy is too interconnected for airtight barriers. Western leaders speak of unity and moral clarity, vowing to choke off Russia's war machine. But behind the scenes, exemptions and quiet deals keep critical trade flowing. The public narrative is one of resolve. The private reality is pragmatic compromise. Leaders must balance foreign policy with domestic economic needs. The West tolerates India's Russian oil purchases, prioritizing strategic partnerships over strict enforcement. The result? Two coexisting narratives. One for the world stage, one for the home front. The war in Ukraine exposes the tension between ideals and interests. In international politics, rhetoric inspires, but interests decide. Ongoing trade with Russia signals a shift to a more fragmented, multipolar world. Emerging powers like India pursue their own interests, not just Western priorities. The crisis has redrawn the global energy map and made energy security about resilience, not just supply. Sanctions show both the power and limits of economic warfare. Painful, but not decisive. Future sanctions will be harder to enforce in a divided world. The story of Russia's continued trade is a lesson in the realities of statecraft. Interests, not ideals, shape policy. In the end, those who navigate this complexity, balancing rhetoric with real interests, will shape the future.